Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT07, and BT07 offers us lots of really fun and powerful cards to be working with, especially on a budget. And today I'm going to be taking a look at a purple deck, and it is going to be a purple deck centered around Eyesmon Scatter Mode. So Eyesmon Scatter Mode is a very powerful card because it's playing with two different synergies that purple likes to be playing around with. It's playing with both on delete and self-sacrificing synergies, so that way we could gain additional value off of not only just the act of deleting our Digimon, but the Digimon's ability that we're going to be deleting as well. And on top of that, it's also interacting with draw and discard based synergies, so we could even lean a little bit into that to gain some, again, additional resources and value, just at making Eyesmon Scatter Mode a very powerful card to be focused around, especially in BT07, because we also have the complement card that we're going to try to take advantage of, which is going to be the Eisman himself. And even though Eisman is going to be limited in BT08, we still have them at full power in BT07. So the deck will have to change come BT08, but we'll get to that when that time comes. But for now, we have a really fun and interesting deck to be playing around with that could be very aggressive and move very fast, sometimes faster than what the opponent might be anticipating or expecting. So on to the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitamas, I'm going to be running one copy of Xiaomon. So this is the 5th Digitama slot, and it could really be anything you want it to be. I just like Xiaomon because if we have enough cards in our trash, then the Digimon is going to be gaining retaliation during our turn, and because we're playing with lots of on-delete abilities, having the ability to want to swing into the opponent's suspended Digimon to have our Digimon get deleted is really good to not only delete their Digimon, but to try to also have alternative ways at triggering our on-delete abilities as well. And then as far as the main Digitama of the deck goes, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Tsunamon. So this should be Demi-Meramon, but Demi-Meramon is getting a little bit too expensive to include in a budget deck. So Tsunamon playing around with that discard-based synergy and helping us draw some additional cards is going to be good enough for the time being, but because this is a budget deck, you could kind of really use any Digitama you feel like would best help the deck overall. I just, again, like Tsunamon because when we're going to be discarding cards, which we are going to be doing, if he's just chilling on the field as an inheritable, then we get to draw a card for one of the cards that we're going to be discarding, which is pretty good. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gabumon. So this is the BT02 version of Gabumon, and this Gabumon we're using for his on-delete ability to help us draw some additional cards and also discard some cards to try to trigger our discard-based synergies. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Candlemon. So Candlemon is just your classic value-efficient vanilla card, where we're just playing him because he has some overall good stats. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gazimon. So Gazimon is a anti-meta card where all we're using him for is his static passive ability, where he's just going to stop the opponent from gaining memory on anything but their tamers. So that way they're going to have to deal with Gazimon in order to make some of their stronger plays, as long as they don't involve tamers and tamer abilities to gain memory. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Labramon. So Labramon is just another card to help us draw and discard, except this time it's an on-play ability, so that way we could just have a Digimon in our raising, hard play Labramon, and still gain some additional value that way. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Gabumon. So Gabumon is going to act as one of the payouts to wanting to discard cards. So its inheritable ability reward us with 2000 DP for the act of discarding a card due to one of our own card effects, which we have plenty of. We can make whatever Digimon that's digivolving on top of him a little bit stronger to help them survive security checks. And then the last level 3 of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Elecmon. So this version of Lecmon is really good for his on-delete ability to try to help delete the opponent's level 3 Digimon. So we have multiple different ways on deleting him, whether he's going to be aggressing onto the opponent's Digimon or onto the opponent's security, or some of our self-sacrificing cards to get rid of him ourselves. Doesn't necessarily matter, he's just a good payout to try to help further control the opponent's field. Next up onto the level 4s, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Ginkakumon Promote. So Ginkakumon Promote, we really only care about the fact that he has the Rush ability, so we could use him in various different ways. The more common way that we're going to be using him is going to be rezzing him out of the trash with some of our option cards, so that way we could just have a cheaper way to just play Ginkakumon Promote, on top of the fact that we also can Digivolve him for 1 on top of a level 4, so that way we could use our Eismon Scatter Mode to line up an Eismon play to be able to play Eismon for free, then Digivolve the Eismon that can't attack into a Ginkakumon Promote which can attack. Then we also have some really solid rookies that we could just hard play, then Digivolve right up into Ginkakumon Promote. So he just has lots of flexibility on how we could use the card to be very aggressive with, making him a very strong card to use. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Eismon Scatter Mode. So Eismon Scatter Mode is kind of the glue that ties this whole deck together, just because he's a really cheap level 4 to hard play in case we don't see any of our rookies. If we do, we want to try to Digivolve him on top of the BT02 Gabumon, so that way we could try to draw and discard even more cards, because the Gabumon has the inheritable ability of on delete to draw 2 and discard 1. Pair that up with his native on delete ability to draw 3 and discard 2, allows us to just draw 5 and discard 3, which is really powerful. And if you do have any Demi-Meramons, or could get your hands on any Demi-Meramons to run in the deck, then that's an extra instance of draw and discard. So he's just allowing us to accelerate our game plan and our deck even faster, just because we could fill up our trash with what we want, and we have the availability to see a lot of potential cards. And what's making Eismon Scatter Mode so good is the fact that we have Eismon to run in tandem with it. So Eismon is a card that we want to be discarding more than actually using for an evolution, just because he gets rewarded for being discarded by playing himself for free, as long as we have an Eismon Scatter Mode in our trash. And then for each of our Eismon Scatter Modes in our trash, this Digimon will also make himself stronger by 2000 DP, acting as, again, a very aggressive level 4 Digimon to be using as a whole. And he even has nice combo play, as I mentioned before, with Ginkakumon Promote, to just be able to have a Digimon to come out for free and start swinging with Promote right away because of that cheap evolution. And then speaking of being really aggressive, the last level 4 I'm going to be running is going to be 3 copies of Ogremon. So this is the Classic Collection version of Ogremon, and this card is actually pretty underrated on how strong he could be. So he has this nice when attacking ability that allows him to gain Security Attack +1 for the low cost of just discarding one of our cards. So if we pair him up with Gabumon, then we could even give him a +2000 DP, just because he swung, discarded a card, triggered Gabumon's ability to give him that extra boost. And that boost will help him live through those multiple security checks, making him a very strong card to use. But on top of that, we also can make whatever Digimon we're Digivolving into a little bit stronger as well, with an inheritable ability that'll give him a +2000 DP, that'll give him +2000 DP for trashing a card in our hand. So it's just more instances of discard, so that way we could trigger some of our discard-based synergies. And then as far as the level 5 slot of the deck, this is kind of a flex spot, and it could really be anything you want it to be. I was kind of thinking about running Phantomon, but I decided to go with Jokermon instead, just because it actually has an on-delete ability we want to try to trigger. So whether we're triggering it ourselves or the opponent is triggering it for us, it doesn't necessarily matter, just because it's a very obnoxious card to sit on the field and get some good value out of. So his on-delete ability basically allows him to replace himself with a level 3 purple Digimon from our trash. Unfortunately, we won't get any of its on-play abilities, but that's okay, just because a level 3 coming off of this Digimon could be really obnoxious for the opponent, depending on what level 3 is actually in our trash to pull from. And like I stated before, we have ways to make him relatively strong to try to live through security checks if we actually want him to be more than just a chip tool. And then as far as the level 6 of the deck, you're almost never going to go up into them, but there are a few instances where you do. I'm going to be running 2 copies of Nidhogman. So Nidhogman is mostly going to be in the deck for discard fodder, just because when he's discarded due to one of our card effects, we'll be able to gain a memory, thus being even more memory efficient than we normally would. And then on top of that, he also has a nice when Digivolving ability, in case we actually do want to go up into him, where we discard a card from our hand to delete one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon. It's a very basic ability, but sometimes it's what we need, but that level of flexibility is what makes the card really good and desirable for the deck. Next, on to the options, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Underworld's Call. So Underworld's Call is another card we generally want to discard more than use, but it's also a really strong card when we want to use it. So when we discard it from one of our card effects, then we get to draw a card, so it's essentially replacing itself, which is pretty good. And on top of that, the ability that we want to try to use with this card if we're actually playing it is allowing us to res a purple level 4 or lower Digimon from our trash for free. Well, it's not really free because we have to pay the cost of the card, but the ideal card that we want to try to bring out is going to be either Ogremon, Ginkakumon Promote just because of the rush, or Eismon Scatter Mode to do more Eismon Scatter Mode shenanigans, with the security ability of activating its main, so it's almost acting like a pseudo-security Digimon to pose a potential threat for the opponent the following turn. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Calling from the Darkness. So Calling from the Darkness is another enabler for us to try to delete our own Digimon and gain some additional benefits. So its main ability states that for deleting one of our Digimon, we then get to return up to 2 purple Digimon from your trash into your hand, allowing us to try to reuse some of our cards and gain additional value off of them. But the craziest thing about this card is if we actually have no Digimon in play, we actually don't have to delete a Digimon to be able to return 2 purple cards from our hand, acting as just a very easy way to just reuse and recycle some of our cards, with the security ability of adding itself to our hand, so that way we could figure out when is the best time to use the card. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Fight for Your Pride. So Fight for Your Pride is basically just extra copies of Underworld's Call. We're really only using it just to bring back level 4 or lower Digimon from our trash and be able to use its on-play ability if we actually are leaning into that direction, and we don't necessarily care about the Myotis synergy and the potential blocker we could gain. Now, if you wanted to, you could have your level 5 be a Myotismon, but there's not really any Myotismons that are actually really worth running, so I don't necessarily recommend it, but that is something you could do, and its security ability is also allowing us to play a purple level 4 Digimon from our trash for free, so that way we have more instances of this ability to try to pose potential threats for the opponent. And then the last option card of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Deathclaw. So Deathclaw is another on-delete enabler where we're going to delete one of our Digimon to delete one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon. So this is one of the primary ways we're going to be trying to pick off the opponent's low-level Digimon while triggering our on-delete synergies. And then its security ability is also pretty threatening by allowing us to delete one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon with no strings attached. So it's just a good card to use overall for some more control and a combo enabler. And then the last card of the deck and only tamer of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Ishida. So you don't necessarily have to run this card if you don't want to. I just feel like having Matt is a really good thing just because his on-play ability allows us to recycle a purple Digimon or purple option card from our trash into our hand, so that way we could reuse some of our cards more efficiently, on top of the fact that he is a memory-fixing tamer for the deck to allow us to try to make our plays even more efficient by always being at least 3 memory at the start of our turn. So this is just a really solid card overall, but again, it doesn't necessarily have to be this card, and you could just use whatever you feel like in this slot instead. And then there's still just a lot of really powerful tech and tools that you could think about incorporating depending on the direction that you're going to be leaning towards. So if you wanted to, we could even swap up the deck and try to play it more hybrid based, just because, well, Koichi is a really good hybrid to just synergize with the deck because his on-play ability is also drawing and discarding with a nice on-delete ability to gain some memory. And then we could use this in combination with Kaiser Leomon to be able to gain that retaliation ability, and we can even use Rahihimon to try to be able to reuse our tamers. So you do have this little tamer package that you can even think about incorporating into the deck if you wanted to, with some really good support and synergy cards to help that style of gameplay, with Neemon trying to be able to play your tamers more efficiently and replay your tamers, on top of the fact that we also have Bokomon to try to help dig out your parts and pieces for your hybrid-based synergies. And then as far as other cards that are just good in general to run in complements with the deck, we have Tapirmon as just another generic draw tool to use for his on delete ability to be another aggressive card, or to combo with some of our other cards to try to gain some additional benefits by needing to sacrifice a Digimon. And then we also have Tsukaimon to try to pair up with Eismon to gain some memory when he gets deleted, so there are more inheritable on delete abilities for us to be playing around with. And we even have more discard based synergies that we could be playing around with in the form of Gabumon for his when attacking ability to help us draw and trash cards as well. Then we even have Ogremon from BT06 to act as another control tool to just hard play him, whether it's off of our options or just straight up from our hand, to be able to delete one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon for just discarding a card, so it's just a good card to use in general. On top of the fact that we also have one of the best level 5s that this deck can hope for in the form of Ogremon. So if you are going to upgrade the deck and run any other level 5, I would recommend Ogremon, because this is a very good card to synergize with the deck, because it's not only a good discard fodder card to give whatever Digimon we want retaliation, but it's also a really good aggro tool, because when he attacks, we get to discard a card and give him plus 3000 DP, so we could combo this with some of our other discard-based synergies and DP boosts to make a really strong level 5 Digimon with. Then we have some really good options that we could lean on, depending on how aggressive you want to be and what kind of tech and tools you want to use. So we could just use Night Raid to be able to res level 3 Digimon, on top of the fact that we also have Demonic Disaster to try to multi-swing with some of our Digimon, and another way to try to delete our own Digimon for various benefits. So unsuspending our Digimon, especially with Ogremon, to be able to swing for potentially 4 security checks as a level 4 is really strong to think of, on top of the fact that we could use that in combination with Ogremon to trigger some of Ogremons abilities or do various other combo plays. And its security ability also helps us play some of our Digimon for free from our trash, which is really good and can create really sticky board states for the opponent to try to deal with. Then we also have some memory boosts to use in the form of Grave Memory Boost to try to have another way of reusing some of our cards for our discard-based synergies, or just to have in our hand. And because it's a memory boost, we could use its delay ability to gain some memory at a later turn. And speaking of memory boosts, we even have Purple Memory Boost to try to help dig out some of our parts and pieces to try to make the deck a little bit more consistent with that same memory boost delay ability to gain memory at a later turn. Then as far as a big control option card, we do have Fly Bullet as a really powerful card to just deal with some problems that the deck might not be able to deal with otherwise in the form of their level 6 Digimon. And if we are leaning a little bit more option heavy, then we could even run something as simple as Mimi to just have a cheap and efficient tamer to use and to gain memory when we're using our options, or take away memory when the opponent is using their options. And then if you don't feel like wanting to run BT02 Matt Ishida, you could run the starter deck Matt Ishida instead, because it's a cheap tamer to play, so you're not really losing the tempo game that much, and it makes the act of deleting our Digimon a little bit more efficient by allowing us to gain memory when our Digimon gets deleted. So there's just a lot of different moving parts and pieces to really put this deck together in various different combinations to make it a really fun and interesting deck to play. But for the most part, this is just my interpretation of an Eismon Rush deck, where the whole idea is just trying to be as aggressive and low to the ground as possible, just because we have very efficient and very powerful level 4 and level 3 Digimon to be working with. Then your top end and option cards are just going to try to help support the fact that your level 4s are going to be relatively aggressive. And as I stated before, there's just a lot of different moving parts and pieces, so you could play around with the ratios of what we already have, or you could try to swap in certain packages or sub-packages depending on how you want to play and what you feel like wanting to use. But this deck shouldn't really cost you anything more than like $20-$25, making it a relatively affordable deck to play, and it could actually surprise the opponent because they might not exactly catch on to what you're trying to do. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.